If it's Sunday, it's the Bach Cantata SCHLEP. Yes, indeed. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com with the Bach Cantata SCHLEP. What does that mean? Well, we're going to look at individual Bach cantatas, one at a time, in numerical order by BWV numbers from now until the end of time, because figure it out, there's 200 and something of them. Assume just wildly that we do, say, 10 a year. That'll take 20 some odd years. I'll probably be dead before we're finished. And so we might as well start and see how far we get. But there's a reason that I'm doing this. There actually is, because as you know, I've talked about this, I'm not necessarily a fan of Bach, and I'm really not a fan of the Bach cantatas. You know, I have my complete Bach edition. I'll bet a lot of you have complete Bach editions. We all have complete Bach editions. You got to have a complete Bach edition. It sits on your shelf like some giant pyramid or sphinx, and you look at it and you go, ooh, the complete Bach edition. And somewhere in that complete Bach edition are 70 some odd discs of cantatas, which no one's ever going to listen to. You may take out one or two or three of them, the popular ones, but is anyone going to pay attention to the rest? Are you paying attention to the rest? I don't know. My job, as I see it, is to make those 70 some odd cantata CDs worth listening to, and therefore the complete Bach edition worth your investment. Whether I like them or not really isn't the point. And I don't dislike them. I expect that having to do this is going to be as much of a revelation for me as it will be for you, because my approach to this music is not the typical approach to this music. Why do I call this the Bach Cantata SCHLEP, for example? Well, aside from sort of being a parody of the opening of If It's Sunday, It's Meet the Press, it's my reaction to John Eliot Gardner's grotesque Bach cantata pilgrimage. Do you remember that event? What he did was he found some person to pay for this. I can't believe somebody coughed up money for this. And he went on this road show to a different church in Europe, every Sunday or every other week or whenever he did it, and did a bunch of Bach cantatas. And he had his sound crew and I think probably a videographer and all these people in tow. And so he did the complete Bach cantatas, which he published along with a book called something like Music from the Castle of Heaven, all of which was the most pretentious, narcissistic, delusional exercise in modern recorded history. And again, the fact that somebody would fund this just boggles the imagination. It really does. It goes to show that there isn't too little money in the performing arts. There's way too much. Because I ask you, seriously, did you wake up with 3 o'clock in the morning, turn to your significant other and say, oh, I can't sleep. There's another release in Gardner's Bach cantata pilgrimage due out, and I'm so excited I just can't rest. I mean, was anybody waiting for that? Does anybody care? It's insane. Absolutely insane. We had the Teldec one with Harnoncourt and Leonhardt of all the Bach cantatas, and we have the series I'm using, Rilling on Hänssler, because I have permission to use musical examples, because they're intelligent, kind, loving, wonderful people, as Bach people ought to be, and because, frankly, Rilling is as great a Bach conductor as we have ever had. His curation and conducting and assembling of the Stuttgart Bach Academy's complete Bach edition is one of the great achievements in the history of recordings. It is still, on balance, the best complete Bach edition you can get, the one on Hänssler, in terms of quality and consistency. And more than that, what Rilling does with the cantatas, first of all, he uses modern instruments, which is neither good nor bad. It doesn't matter what kind of instruments you use. What matters is how well they're played. And they are played marvelously because he's an incredible Bach conductor, number one. Number two, he has the best singers. And my view of the Bach cantatas is they are not a religious experience. They are music, like any other music. They are just entertainment. They are there to entertain us, to please us. And I want the performance to be as pleasing as humanly possible, which means I want to hear the best voices. I want to hear a professional chorus. I don't want squeaky little boys crooning away in the background. I want great musical values at every point. And if you want that, and I really think you should, then you're going to want to hear Rilling do the Bach cantatas. The other reason I'm doing Rilling is because they all come in a separate box, 71 fun-filled CDs with a CD-ROM giving you all the texts and translations and all that stuff and notes. And it's very, very inexpensive. It costs less than $100. So if you don't have a complete Bach edition and you want the Bach cantatas, this is the one to get. You also have a very nice booklet with the contents. It's all done so intelligently. And so these are the performances we're going to be using as our exemplars because they are the ones that I think will give us the most pleasure. And that's what it's about, folks. It's about pleasure, not penitence, and not like what John Eliot Gardner does, which is, aside from being completely narcissistic and self-aggrandizing, leaving that aside, his view of Bach as music in the castle of heaven and all this stuff, it's designed to bludgeon you with the cosmic greatness of it all. It's everything I hate about the classical music business. Bach wrote these cantatas for a congregation of not particularly music-loving Leipzigers every Sunday who had to be in church, whether they wanted to be there or not, and they had to listen to a cantata. And he wrote them in order to be readily accessible and easily approachable, no matter how musically sophisticated we may think it is. That's the infrastructure. We don't care about the infrastructure. What we need to care about is what the music expresses and how well it expresses it and how amusingly or entertainingly or even when it's very serious and dark and tragic, how deeply, how emotionally, how expressively the music strikes us. And Bach wrote music that he thought would impress his audience exactly at that level. And I don't think we need to get into it any more than that, to be honest with you. I think we need to talk about the words, the music, and let it rip. And that's what we're going to do, one cantata at a time, because the Bach pilgrimage was an absurdity. You're really going to suck up 200 sacred church cantatas in just a brief span of time? And so if it takes us decades to absorb all of this music, fine. What's the rush? Who's in a hurry? Why was Gardner in such a hurry? Why do his performances sound like he's in such a hurry? I don't know. I'm not worried about it. It's just the whole thing was just nutty. And so I have invented the Bach cantata SCHLEP. Now, I'm not going to do one of these every Sunday. I don't go to church every Sunday. In fact, I don't go to church any Sunday. I'm not interested. And so the religious aspect doesn't appeal to me at all. I'm not going to worry about it. We may not do one every Sunday. This is an occasional series when the mood strikes me and hopefully you, but we are going to get through big chunks of this music. And I think when we're done talking about it, whether or not we finish or not, you will have all the tools you need to explore this repertoire on your own and to get absolutely the most out of it that you can musically. And I'm taking nothing for granted. I do not believe Bach was living in the castle of heaven. I don't believe he had a special communication with the Almighty. I think he was a very great composer. That's one thing. But he was a composer who wrote music for us, and we're treating it like that. I hope that's very, very clear. So we're going to start with BWV number 1. Bach Verzeichnis number 1. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to do before I do these talks is I sit down with a score, I go through the whole cantata, so hopefully I know something of what I'm talking about. That turned out to be somewhat entertaining all by itself, because if you go on to IMSLP, you'll see all of the old Bach edition cantatas all just listed in convenient numerical order, which is probably what I should have done. But no, I got snookered by the music, the snotty music industrial military complex to getting the complete cantatas in the Barenreiter Urtext edition, which is the Neue Bach Ausgabe, the new Bach edition. And the new Bach edition thought, no, that's stupid. Why should we preserve the convenient numerical order that everyone has known these pieces by for the past 150 years or so? No. Let's organize the cantatas by their function in the week of the liturgical Lutheran calendar, which we all know by heart, right? Yeah. So I wanted to find the score to follow along with BWV number 1, number 1. So I figured I'd take out volume 1. I've got 18 of these things. They're like 500 pages each. And I would just take out the first volume and get BWV number 1. Wrong. Oh, I was so stupid. Why should it be that simple when they could make it hideously complicated? First thing we need to do is we need to take out the index volume. Now, the index volume lists all the cantatas and chorales and sacred songs by Bach. And it lists them by title, which doesn't help you if you don't know what the title of BWV number 1 is. And also, there's a separate listing by BWV number so that you can figure out where they match this thing. So we go to the index. Let's go to the index, which has the listing on page 115 by BWV number. And here we have BWV number 1. Yes, there it is. Wie schön leuchtet der Morgenstern. That's the cantata, which means how beautifully shines the morning star. I mean, it's a lovely, lovely title for a lovely cantata. And it turns out that it occurs in volume 2 of cantatas for celebrations, the Feast of the Virgin Mary. Isn't that obvious? So that's what you need to look for. And according to this, they have the volume of the original Neue Bach Ausgabe, and also in Schubert, which is Schubert is what actually this is. But they don't, the pocket edition of the scores, but they don't tell you that. You have to figure out what a Schubert is. So according to Schubert, it's in volume 11, page 435, with the asterisk. Now, what does the asterisk mean? Well, I'm going to show you what the asterisk means. It turns out that if you look at the top of the pages where the page numbers are, there is no page 435 or whatever the heck that thing was. There isn't one. Why? Because all they've done is gather up the original volumes of the Neue Bach Ausgabe in the order by the Lutheran liturgical year. I mean, are you listening to this? Can you believe this? This is what they're doing, okay? And they reproduce them here with the original pagination. So if Cantata BWV1 was in a volume that had, say, 120 pages, then it's pages numbers 1 through 120. There's no 400 and something. But what there is, if you look at the bottom of these volumes, you'll see at the bottom. See the bottom? There's a page number. See that? With an asterisk. That's the page numbers in here. So we go to page 435. Yes, here it is. It's here. It's actually here among the 200 and some odd Bach cantatas. It's in volume 11, page 435. Isn't that easy? I mean, this is before we even get to talk about the music. We've been going for 12 minutes, and I apologize for that. But after this, we won't have to go through. I mean, I may remark on this periodically, on the absurdity of it all, but we'll be able to go straight to the music in a more efficient way. Anyway, so here we are on page 435. We find that we have a cantata that is composed for 2 horns, 2 oboe da caccia. Now, what is an oboe da caccia? That's important, actually, very important. The oboe da caccia is an oboe that it's sort of like an English horn. It has this very similar tone to an English horn. It's an oboe that's pitched about a fifth lower than the modern oboe, so it has a more mellow and also sort of nasal, reedy quality. It's quite wonderful, beautiful sound. It was invented in Leipzig, and it was invented in Leipzig basically about the year that Bach got there, which was around 1723, and he used it in a bunch of his cantatas. And there's a reason he used it in this one. So you've got two horns, two oboes da caccia, and two solo violins. Okay, now, and then strings and the continuo, which in these marvelous performances with Helmut Rilling is nicely varied. The continuo between using an organ as the keyboard instrument and a harpsichord, which gives you some nice variety in between the arias. So, what does this tell us about the cantata? Well, wie schön leuchtet der Morgenstern is of how beautiful shines the morning star is a pastoral subject. You know, it's for the Annunciation to the Virgin Mary that she was going to be carrying the Son of God and how happy she is about that fact. And as you know, this sort of doesn't take place in a bar or a restaurant in a major metropolitan area. It takes place out in the country. That's when these things happen, when you're out and you're looking at the morning star, which is the planet Venus, in case you're curious. That's the morning star. And you don't want to have music that sounds sort of like, bar music in a saloon for that sort of thing. It's out in the country. It's rural. It's rustic. And it's pastoral. It has Bach uses Siciliana rhythms in 12/8 time, that dum, bum, 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 that sort of lullaby kind of rhythm melody. We're going to hear those rhythms in this particular cantata. And because it's an outdoors cantata, he uses outdoors instruments. In other words, the hunting horns, the two horns, and the hunting oboes, which will have solos. And that immediately sets the ambience for the entire piece. Bach is also extremely sensitive to the text of the poem that he's setting. Now, thank God we don't have to be. The poetry is horrible. And you remember they say about opera, there are only two opera plots? You know, the comic opera, they sing, they get married. The tragic opera, they sing, they die. I mean, that's basically it. It's the same thing with religious poetry and Bach cantatas. There are two kinds of poetries. There's, I love God and I'm very happy. And then there's, my life is horrible and miserable, and I want pity and God to have mercy on me. That's it. It's one or the other. And they managed to say these two things 200 and some odd different ways in the course of the Bach cantatas. So we don't need to worry too much about the words. We only need to worry about the words to the extent that Bach notices them and does something musical with them. So, once again, we have the hunting horns and the oboe da caccia, which you'll hear quite distinctly in these samples that I'm going to play you, because the wonderful people here, again, allowed me to use sound samples. So there's that. But also, the second aria has the line, with our mouths and the sound of strings. Strings. It's wonderful when you have poetry that talks about musical instruments, isn't it? Because that gives Bach something to do as a composer. And so you have the two solo violins who are tootling away with this piece at the beginning, and finally they get a whole aria to themselves where they talk about the strings. So that is why you have two solo violins and two oboes da caccia and the hunting horns in this particular cantata. The only other thing you need to know in order to enjoy the cantata, and we're going to go through it now, is the overall structure. Now, this is a chorale cantata. A chorale is, of course, nothing but a hymn. It's a hymn tune. And the hymn is Wie schön leuchtet der Morgenstern, how beautifully shines the morning star. That's the hymn. And the hymn has a pre-existing Lutheran tune that Bach is going to use. And in his chorale cantatas, there's a very generally accepted structure. Sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're smaller. But basically what he does is that you begin with what's called a chorale fantasia. That sets the tone of the entire work. So you're going to hear the oboes and the horns and the violins, and they're all playing a wonderful independent piece of music against which Bach will introduce the first verse of the hymn. And that is going to be sung by the choir against all of this orchestral stuff. You know, Bach, of course, was a contrapuntal genius. And counterpoint we like to think of as very strict, as in fugues and things like that. But really, a lot of the joy of counterpoint is this, that Bach can write an entire independent movement and superimpose a hymn tune on top of it. The hymn tune will be in long notes in the soprano part, while simultaneously the other three parts, the alto, the tenor, and the bass, will be singing a canonic fast version of the same hymn tune underneath the soprano part. And so you've got this amazing contrapuntal fandango going on, all of which is perfectly clear when you listen to it. I mean, again, that's, how Bach does it is the infrastructure part. We don't have to care. We only have to know what it sounds like. And so this particular course, there's a long introduction where Bach sets the scene, and then the sopranos enter with the first line of the hymn. The rest of the chorus is doing its thing underneath, and the instrumental movement is going on all around it, and they alternate back and forth doing that for a while, and that's the opening chorus. So most chorale cantatas will begin with a chorale fantasia of that type. I mean, they all have different melodies. They're all inspired by different, settings of the text and whatnot. But basically, you're going to have a fantasia movement for the opening chorus. After the chorus, there will be 2 arias, maybe more, maybe less, but in this case, 2 arias. And then finally, at the end, the congregation will join the choir and all the instrumentalists in singing the rest of the chorale. They will sing the melody, and Bach, of course, has harmonized the chorale for the rest of the choir. And that's the cantata. Most of these things last, 15, 20 minutes or so. They're very entertaining, and the music is quite lovely. And again, you don't really need to worry about what the words say beyond knowing the elements that Bach is seeking to capture. In Bach's own time, they would have printed the words and passed them out so people could follow along. And if you want to do that, you can do it too. The words are easy to find anywhere online. So let us begin, first of all, with the opening chorus. And I'm going to play just the ritornello, which is the opening melody, the opening scene-setting bit, and the entry of the chorus with the hymn tune in the soprano line. And you can hear exactly what's going on in the opening chorus. Wie schön leuchtet der Morgenstern. Or Morgenstern, I don't know. Anyway, there it was. Beautiful. And you hear the horns and you hear the violins and he's setting up the whole cantata. It's quite splendid. So the chorus is over. Then there's a brief recitative which introduces the first aria. The recitatives, nobody cares about. I mean, they always basically say, well, now here's Mary and she's very happy, or something like that in this case. And then the first aria there are 2 basic kinds of arias that Bach is going to use. One of them is the da capo aria, which we'll hear second. And the first, this is an aria concertante, in which the soprano is duetting with an oboe da caccia, the oboe, that hunting oboe thing. And the form of an aria in this case is exactly the same thing as the first movement of a concerto. There's no difference. There's no difference between an aria and a concerto. None whatsoever. It's vocal music. And these are basically, because it's composed for a solo oboe da caccia and the soprano, it's basically a duet between the instrument and the voice in concerto form. Now, Baroque concerto form couldn't be simpler. You have an opening tune, then you have a solo, then you have a bit of the opening tune, then you have a solo, then you have a bit of the opening tune, then you have a solo, and then the opening tune wraps it up. That's it. It's A, B, A, B, A, B, A. I mean, that's the form. And that's exactly the form that these arias take. And, you don't have literal repetitions of the opening tune. You hear maybe a piece of it, or maybe the voice will join in. I mean, you can blur the outlines of these formal divisions in any kind of imaginative ways, but that's the basic structure of the first aria. Here now is the ritornello, that is the opening tune with the oboe da caccia and the entry of the soprano. Lovely, absolutely lovely, isn't it? So after that aria, there's another recitative in which they talk about something or other that has to do with God. I don't care. And then the second aria, which is a tenor aria in this case, and this is the one that talks about praising God with your mouth and with strings. And so you'll hear the two violins, okay, and of course, and the entire string section. I mean, this is all strings. I mean, Bach writes this particular aria. The previous aria was just oboe and continuo with the cello on the bottom. This is the full string section, two solo violins, and the tenor voice. Now, this is a da capo aria. In a da capo aria, the form is A, B, A. And you have basically an A section in which you have that opening thing, and then the solo's entrance, and they go back and forth a bit. And then there's a middle section on separate material. And then the whole A section gets repeated. That's a da capo aria. The repeat is supposed to be varied with ornaments. How much you ornament depends on how ornamental the music already is and your taste as a singer, as an artist. Bach tended to write things out very extensively, so he didn't leave lots and lots of extra room for crazy ornamentation. And also, in this particular aria, the B section is almost indistinguishable. It just seems like a continuation of what you've already heard. Sometimes they can be in a different tempo and key and totally different, but in this case it's not. It's all basically very continuous. So here is the opening string aria in Wie schön leuchtet Morgenstern for tenor, orchestra, and two solo violins. Okay, that's it. I mean, you're almost done. It's very simple, isn't it? And then finally, there's the concluding chorale where the congregation sings along with the melody, and then the chorus does the rest of the harmony that Bach wrote. And here is a little bit of that final chorale, just so you get a sense of what it sounds like. That's the whole work. Now, some people have claimed that chorale cantatas are not the most effective and interesting form of cantata because they are anticlimactic. That is, you have all of this very elaborate music and then it ends with a very simple hymn that you can sing along to if you feel like it. I don't think it's anticlimactic at all. I don't, because, it's almost like a theme and variations where you don't hear the theme until the very end. I think it's very fulfilling, because Bach begins with a version of the theme, and the theme, in a sense, of the hymn governs the entire trajectory of the cantata, and so it all comes to rest in that final hymn, which is, it's your reward for having sat through all this lousy German romantic religious poetry till you get to the actual hymn. Anyway, that is Bach's first cantata, and we're going to consider one after the other as the mood strikes us. And I hope you get a chance to listen to them by yourself in your spare time and enjoy the beautiful music that Bach wrote. And some of them we'll like more than others, and we are going to be free to like what we like, dislike what we dislike, and treat Bach as if he is any other composer who has the obligation to entertain us, because we're paying for it. We're the listeners. It's not our jobs, as John Eliot Gardner would have us believe, to sit back and worship him, first of all, and the composer in abject humility, because it's also astonishing. Geniuses are always astonishing. But I don't care if someone's a genius or not. They still have an obligation to entertain me. I'm the listener, and I'm more important than they are, and so are you. And you need to take that attitude. I'm serious about that when it comes to this music. There's no joy to be gotten, I don't think, out of listening to something simply to just be impressed with how beyond you it is. It's not beyond you. It's not beyond any of us. It's for us. It's written, Bach wrote it for us. And we have a right to be demanding, and we have a right to insist that it rises to a certain level of quality, which, this being Bach, we never have to worry about. But we have a right to like what we like. And I hope you enjoyed Bach's BWV, Bach Werkverzeichnis, Cantata number 1, How Beautifully Shines the Morning Star. Boy, have we got some stuff to keep on listening to, don't we, folks? Take care. I'll see you next time at the Bach Cantata SCHLEP.